Well, for the past month, we've been talking about it. We've had it circled on our calendars. Now it's here. The 10-game gauntlet that will determine the Mariners' playoff lives. Let's talk about it here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Thursday, September 21st, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. So, on the show today, we'll get you set for the massive series between the Mariners and Rangers. That's, of course, starting tomorrow night down in Arlington. As a reminder, you can catch all the action on the Mariners' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. Today, we're going to go over how Scott Servais will likely need to manage this series and the two series after it. We'll also give you 6 key players, 3 apiece, for this series and over this stretch. But first, Colby, let's cut through the BS. How many wins do the Mariners need over the next 10 games to get into the postseason?
I would say 7 is the number you got to shoot for to feel really confident that you're getting in. I think 6 gives you a good shot of getting in. 5, you're really playing with fire. And you at that point, you need somebody, Houston or Texas, to go 4 and 6 or whatever, to even have a shot there. So yeah, anything less than 5, you're out. 5 or 6, you have a shot. 6, obviously much better than 5, but 7 would almost certainly get you in. So it's 6 or 7 at least.
Yeah, 7, I feel 110% confident that you're in. 6, I mean, that would get you to 90 wins, which we've said is the pretty much going to be the magic number for you to get in. And I maintain that. I think if you get to 90 wins, you're going to be in the postseason. 5, you're definitely not beating out Texas, because if you only get 5 wins, that means that you're not going to have the tiebreaker over them, and that means that probably that series or those 2 series against them did not go as you wanted them to. So at that point, you're probably solely relying on the Astros tiebreaker, or the tiebreaker that you have with the Astros coming into play, and you're relying on the Royals and the Diamondbacks to handle them, and you're also relying on yourself to have a good series against them Monday through Wednesday. So yeah, win 6 games, please, and let's just leave very little doubt. 7 games would be amazing, because that for sure gets you in, but I think 6 is a good spot to be in. On yesterday's show, we had a couple of comments from listeners asking about tiebreakers and how they all work. I don't think like the 3-team tiebreakers are really going to matter. There's a very, very, very small chance of that happening. I know all 3 of these teams are basically in a virtual tie with one another right now, but given how many times Seattle has to play Houston and Seattle has to play Texas over the next 10 days, I don't think that it's going to wind up mattering. The Mariners, of course, have the tiebreaker over the Astros. The Astros have the tiebreaker over the Rangers, and the Rangers have the tiebreaker over the Mariners. So none of those teams have tiebreakers over the 2 others. So it comes down to overall record against the 2 other teams. And right now, the Mariners have a slight edge on that front. They're 9-6 against both the Rangers and the Astros. Most of that is the 8-2 record they have against the Astros this season. That's doing the heavy lifting there for the Mariners. But again, they play 10 games against these teams, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So that's how it all works. Now let's switch gears here. Let's talk about how Scott Servais is going to manage this whole thing. This is going to be a wild 10 days. And Scott is going to have to be on his A game in order to maneuver through all of this. So let's discuss what that means in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. And with killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. So forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Again, you can catch the Mariners and the Rangers starting tomorrow night and over the course of the weekend on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. So we've been saying this for the last few weeks on the show. The playoffs start for the Seattle Mariners on September 22nd. The playoffs are here right now. It is do or die time. And Scott Servais has to manage this thing like it's do or die time, like it is the playoffs already. Now, you can't necessarily do that one for one, right? You can't completely manage it like the playoffs. Like you can't do things like bringing in Luis Castillo late in the game out of the bullpen, stuff like that, for example. But Colby, when we say Scott has to manage it like the playoffs, what does that mean?
It means that you kind of have to treat it like game one of a playoff series where you're not, in theory, you're not using Castillo on short rest. You're not necessarily bringing in your game two starter, into game one to get out of a tight spot. But what it does mean is that you can't really sit around and wait for somebody to find it. Either they have it that day or they don't. And if they don't, you need to get them out of that game as soon as possible, kind of regardless of what it does to your bullpen. Like that's the situation you're in. The other way it kind of manifests itself is that you really can't afford to like kick games. So like, even if you're down like 5-2 in the sixth, like you probably should still use Matt Brash. You probably should still use Andres Munoz, because you can't really afford to be like, oh, we'll play for tomorrow, because every single game is so critical. There's certainly a point where, like, I don't know, tomorrow, if you're down 10-2 in the seventh, then like, okay, it's not what we want to do, but we'll throw Bizardo, we'll throw Leon, and we'll save the guys for tomorrow. But if you're within a swing of the bat of tying up the game, you probably have to use your highest leverage guys if they're available. When the situation dictates, you can't just be like, well, it's 4-2 in the eighth. We're probably going to lose this game, so I guess we'll just let Trent Thornton go out there and try and pitch to the middle of their order and save Brash for tomorrow. No, you got to use Brash. You got to use Munoz, and you got to hope your offense can figure it out. So it's one of those things where you have to be pretty aggressive with your bullpen. You have to have a really short leash on your starters. You can't let games get out of hand early. We saw this last year, by the way, in the Toronto series, game 2, where that game got out of hand. Robbie Ray didn't have it. And yet Scott kept on going. He went to Sewald in like the 4th inning. He went to Brash early. He went to Munoz early, and he pretty much emptied out that pen. And a lot of us were like, why are you doing that? Like, save those guys for tomorrow. And it ended up being really important. It was a risky gamble, because if you lost that game, then all those guys are, tired for the next day. They threw a lot of pitches, but you kind of have to act like that. You kind of have to treat it like that. So you have to be willing to get your starter out early. If he doesn't have it, you just can't sit around and hope that he finds it. Not against these teams. You have to be willing to be aggressive with your bullpen arms. And if that means, Brash has to come in the 5th and get the last 2 outs there, and then he has to go, the 6th, then so be it. Like you really have to be aggressive with your best arms. You have to use your best arms as often as they can physically go. And you have to be really aggressive with your pinch running and your pinch hitting. Like if there's a matchup you like, even if it's only the 4th inning, if it's, I don't know, Will Smith versus Dom Leon or Canzone, and the bases are loaded and there's 1 out, even though you might want Canzone in there to face, Leclerc in the 7th, you might have to go to Dylan Moore. You have to be willing to pull that trigger. Every run matters. Every situation matters. And you kind of have to, it's weird. You kind of can't put too much focus on tomorrow. Today is the most important game of the season. And that's kind of how you have to manage it within reason. And when you get to the last 3 or 4 games, those are elimination games, the reason kind of goes out the window. You know, if Castillo is scheduled to pitch on Saturday, right, second to last day of the year, but you're in a position where you need him for an inning on Thursday, well, you might have to go to him on Thursday and Saturday. Like you're in that spot, but you're not quite to that extreme yet. These aren't elimination games,
Mhm.
but you do have to manage them like they're games pretty early in a postseason series where you can't kick them, you can't punt the games, you can't hope that your starter figures it out so he can eat some innings for you. It's go time. It's sprint time, and if a guy has
Yeah.
to pitch 4 days in a row, he's got to pitch 4 days in a row. I don't know what to tell you. That's just kind of where we're at.
Right. Right. And so this is especially important when we talk about this series in particular, because both Bryce Miller and Brian Wu, as of now, are scheduled to make starts. And so you have to keep those guys on a short leash. You can't let Brian Wu just sit out there and eat it, give up 7 runs in the first 3 innings if it goes, similarly to his major league debut down in Texas. If Bryce
Yep.
Miller is only landing the fastball and the fastball is catching a lot of plate and, the Rangers maybe are not punishing it yet, you need to nip that in the bud before it does eventually get out of hand, because this is a lineup that will take advantage of those opportunities if you give them enough of them, right? You might get lucky and you might be able to survive it for a little bit, but not for the duration of 5-6 innings. So with Bryce Miller, if you think that Bryce Miller doesn't have it, you got to go get him. Even if he hasn't given up, a ton of runs, even if he's only given up a run or two through 4, right? You still, like, if you see the signs, you just got to call it right then and there. And I know that you got to try and manage this bullpen, et cetera, and keep guys fresh and all of that. And it's still the regular season and you still got to play a bunch of games, but this is go time, like you said.
Yeah. It is worth noting too, by the way, is that the Mariners bullpen is in excellent shape.
Yeah.
Munoz has thrown, I think, 9 pitches since Saturday night. So he's totally fine. Brash has appeared in 1 of the last 4 or 5 games. So he's totally fine. Spire, I don't think has pitched since Saturday. Topa has, pitched, I think it's something like 22 pitches since Saturday. Like the bullpen is in really good shape right now.
Right.
So yeah, that's not really a valid excuse. Shouldn't be anybody who's unavailable on Friday and Saturday. And so if they are, then they don't need to be on this roster. You got to make a move there.
Yeah.
So and that's the other thing too, is like don't be surprised if there's like a few moves made in this 10-game stretch, and it seems like this is the squad and you're rolling with it. Don't be surprised if Bizardo gets sent down and they call up Riley O'Brien or Casey Sadler or Prolander Baroa in the middle of it, and you're just like, whoa! Don't be surprised if they send down Haggerty and call up like Ryan Bliss. Like you have to play the matchup as tight as you can, and sometimes other different guys give you better chances, and you take those shots.
So it really comes down to the foresight of Scott Servais, and not really in terms of the next day or the next couple of days, but in terms of the future of the game that he's currently in, right?
Yep.
And so again, that's making judgment calls. Like if you don't think that Bryce Miller has it, you just got to go get him. You can't try and extract a couple of extra outs from him, right? It's the stupid game, stupid prizes type of thing that we talk about with Scott. And I can let that slide a little bit more during just the natural course of the season, but in games like this, no, you have to be quick on the draw with those decisions. So that's going to be the key for me when it comes to Scott Servais and how he manages the next 10 days and manages these next 10 games. Now, depending on the circumstances, right, and depending on what's going on in the standings and all that might change a little bit, right? There might be some context there. That helps with some of those decisions, but for now, as things currently stand, he has to be very aggressive, very, very aggressive, because this could be it. This could determine the entire season. One moment, one decision could determine the entire season, whether or not you are playing baseball beyond October 1st. So
Yep.
It's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. We're going to talk about 3 key players each. We're going to give you 3 each that are going to be huge for the Mariners, or that we think are going to have to be huge for the Mariners in order to make their way into the postseason over the next 10 days. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Celebrate the start of the NFL season with great offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can be in on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKEDON, kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. You can catch the Mariners and the Rangers starting tomorrow night on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. So, Colby, there's going to be a lot of guys on this team that are going to have to step up over the next 10 days. But let's go with 6 key players to make this whole thing happen here. You're going to do 3. I'm going to do 3. We're not going to have any overlap. Tell me one of your 3 guys that you have that you think are going to be key to making the postseason.
Yeah, I think it's pick a starting pitcher. It's probably one of those guys. I'm going to go with Logan Gilbert. He's got both of his starts are going to be against Texas, so that's kind of the team that you're chasing right now. The team that you have the biggest hill to climb over, and both of those starts right now, he's facing an undetermined pitcher. It sounds like it's probably going to be Martin Perez, but we don't know. That those are games that you have to win. Gilbert, it doesn't matter who Texas is going to start in those games. Logan Gilbert is better than whoever they're going to throw in there. He has to pitch well, and it's a really good lineup. We know that they can score runs. Gilbert has to pitch well. He has to shut that lineup down, because when you have such a clear pitching edge like they do in game 2 on Saturday, you have to take advantage of those wins, of those, potential wins, because you need as many as you can. You need to bank a couple of those, because if you lose a game like that, now you have to go and you have to, beat Framber and Verlander to make up for it, So I think Gilbert has to, in his last 2 starts, both against Texas, he doesn't have to dominate, because that's a good lineup, but he has to find a way to go 7 innings, give up 3 or fewer runs, limit damage, limit opportunities. If he could do better than that, fantastic. But he can't be 5 innings, 4 runs, and he leaves in the 6th of a 4-4 game. He has to be better than that. So to me, Logan Gilbert is the key here, because both of his starts are coming against Texas, and both of his starts as of now are lined up to be against probably Martin Perez. You're better than that. You're better than him. You have to outduel him. You have to kind of carry the water in your starts so that you maybe can save up bullpen arms where possible. And those are 2 opportunities. I think those 2 games that Gilbert pitches, they're pretty close to must wins, unless, again, you're going to beat Verlander and Valdez, which is possible. But I think Gilbert is kind of the key to the rotation.
Right. I'm going to stick with the rotation here, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to pick both Bryce Miller and Brian Wu here, because they're in such similar situations, right? Miller is going to start this thing off, right? He's going to set the tone, and depending on what happens in the start, that's going to have a trickle-down effect on the rest of the series and how the Mariners are positioned for the rest of this series, both negatively or positively, right? If he goes out there and he shoves, right, bullpen's in a great spot. But if he goes out there and, again, if Scott Servais has to make that decision and take him out after 3 or 4 or whatever, that's going to have a negative impact on the bullpen for the rest of that series, potentially. So you need a really good start out of Bryce Miller here to kick this series off. And, he's been up and down, but he has shoved against a couple of really good lineups this year. And you're going to need that version of Bryce Miller tomorrow night for sure. As for Brian Wu, I mean, I feel like it would be unfair to say like he needs to go out there and shove just like Bryce Miller, because the situations are a little bit different. They're both young guys who have already blown past their career high in professional innings thrown, but Wu is obviously an even more delicate case than Miller here. There's 3 different situations that he could find himself in on Sunday. Either having to salvage a game in Texas, either going for the series win, or either going for the sweep, right? In all three of those situations, he's going to have to be big time for this team. But really, like, again, I don't think he necessarily needs to shove, or that should be the expectation put on him. But he also can't be an utter black hole. He has to be able to at least keep you in the ball game. And so if you can just get 4 earned runs, 3 earned runs, or fewer over 4 or 5 innings, I would consider that a win from Brian Wu. But again, you're gonna need him. You're gonna need him to at least be decent here, because he's going to start 2 of these 7 games against the Rangers. At least as of now, right? We'll see if maybe they finagle their rotation a certain way. They obviously have pushed him back, a couple times already. They clearly don't feel 100% confident in him down the stretch here, but they're going to need him at least to a certain degree. And so, yeah, he has to be a key player, right? Just for that reason alone. Colby, who's your next guy here?
Yeah, so I think you're going to need your lineup to step up as well in this last 7 games. They were pretty good in the Oakland series, but hardly, a juggernaut. And we saw how bad they were against the Dodgers. But at the same time, it's easy to say Julio or JP or anything like that. But
Yeah.
I feel like you're going to get something from Julio. You're going to get something from JP. You're going to get something from Teoscar. You're going to get something from, Cal at some point. So what you're looking for really, I think, is somebody who hasn't had a good year step up and have a good year. And to me, there's 2 candidates for this, but I went with Ty France, who has been really at best mediocre all year.
Yeah.
And has at times been one of the worst hitters in the American League. Like, he's looked awful at times. And this is what we get to, man. There's 10 games left. We're not asking you to be something that you've never been before. If you could just be first half Ty France from 2022 for 10 games this year, it could make all the difference in the world, because Ty France, we know, has the capability over a couple of week stretch to hit 4, 5, 6 home runs, to, hit 5, 6 doubles, to hit 300 with high on base and high slugging, and really kind of carry a lineup. So if you could get that version of Ty France for any length of time with any, kind of like any reasonable percentage of what you've gotten in the second half from Teoscar Hernandez and Julio and JP, if you get all that going at the same time, it makes your lineup deeper. It makes it more dangerous. And it gives you so many more options on how to, kind of set up your lineup. So I think Ty is a guy here who, again, we're asking basically 10 games to salvage his season. If he could get it going, and he's been okay in September. Strikeouts are still ugly, but he's hitting 270 this month, something in that range. And he is, getting on base a decent amount still by getting hit by a lot of pitches, but it just, you need some power now. If he hit 270 over his last 10 games, but he hit 4 homers and added 3 or 4 doubles, it would make a lot of difference for Seattle. So I do think that Ty France is a guy who hasn't produced really at all this year with any kind of regularity. And that's a guy I would like to see really heat up here in these last 10 games and finally kind of be the guy that the Mariners thought that he was going to be all year. And if he does that, then I think Seattle does have a chance to, win 7 of these last 10.
Agreed. And I'm going to stick with that theme, and I'm going to go with another corner infielder for the Mariners here, Eugenio Suarez, who's had a rough month of September, just a 77 WRC plus this month. But he has heat up at least a little bit over the last few games. In Oakland, he collected 4 hits. He was hitting the ball hard. He had some rough at bats at times as well. But if he can just be at least semi hot the rest of the way, that would benefit the Mariners greatly here, because you feel good about Julio, you feel good about JP, you feel pretty good about Cal and Teo, but odds are you're not going to get all 4 of those guys clicking at once. So who's going to be the guy outside of those 4 who steps up and makes the difference? And I think Gino is the prime candidate for that, because look, he's going to get opportunities with runners in scoring position. He's going to get some big at bats over the next 10 days. Is he going to be able to convert? The Mariners need him to. The Mariners could really use a 2-run, 3-run bomb out of Eugenio Suarez. And I think that it will come down to a moment or two like that over the next 10 days where it's going to come down to Gino probably, or where, Gino's got runners on second and third, 1 out. And if he strikes out, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the guy behind him. And that might derail the inning. Right. So he has to come through in those moments. And, as of late, he really hasn't. But we know that he's more than capable of doing that. He had plenty of clutch hits and clutch home runs last year during the run to October. You need him to be that guy again this time around. So, Colby, who's your last guy on your list?
Well, when I brought you this idea, you made a joke.
Yes.
Because I said I was going to surprise people with my last pick.
Wait, was I right?
And you made a joke. You're like, I can't wait for you to pick Sam Haggerty. And you were a quarter right, because I'm taking the entire right-handed bench of the Seattle Mariners. So that is Caballero, Haggerty, Moore, and Luis Torrens.
All right.
Why? The Mariners are going to face Jordan Montgomery twice. They're going to face Framber Valdez. The Rangers have Andrew Heaney, Aroldis Chapman, Will Smith. Yeah. They also sounds like they're going to start Martin Perez, or at least that was the plan. They've moved up Montgomery a little bit to start on Saturday, but they're probably going to start Perez at some point in that Mariner series or pitch him out of the pen. There's going to be a lot of lefties, at least 4 starts. I think at least 4 starts of the last 10 are going to be started by left-handed pitching. The Mariners haven't gotten a ton from Dylan Moore lately. They haven't gotten a ton at the plate from Caballero, with the exception of, Friday night. And Haggerty's been okay. He's been okay since he got called up. And Torrens has been totally fine, but it's only been 5 at-bats. Mm-hmm. Now, these guys aren't going to start every single game. Like, you're probably not going to take at-bats away from Jared Kelenic right now to give them to Sam Haggerty. You're probably not taking at-bats away from Cal Raleigh to give. But these guys are going to be important because you're going to face a ton of left-handed pitching over these last 10 games. And those guys are going to have to contribute. And it's not just at the plate. They're going to have to play, some good defense. They're going to have to be ready to go earlier than they probably normally would be. And for 3 of those guys, at least, a lot of these games feel like they're going to come down to a run or two, and having those guys come off the bench and run and be able to steal a base or go to first or third on a base hit to, left center field. Those are going to be critical. And the Mariners have a lot of slow guys on this team. So I think that the right-handed bench or really what is the standard bench of the Mariners of Moore, Haggerty, Caballero, Torrens, I think those guys need to be, they need to play a pretty significant role. They don't have to be stars. They don't have to look like everyday players, but when they're called upon, they have to get the bunt down. They have to execute the hit and run. They have to steal the bag. Runners on second and third, infield playing back of in a 2-0 game. They got to get that guy in from third. They have to do the little things. They have to be ready to play wherever they need to play for the last 3 innings or 4 innings of a game because they got called on to pinch run in the 5th instead of the 7th. I think the bench is going to be key here, particularly the righties on the bench, because you're going to face a ton of left-handed pitching and you're going to need base runners late. You're going to need guys who can steal bags late, can't get picked off, can't do stupid things. You can't have terrible at-bats. The bench, the Mariners bench, is going to play a huge role in these last 10 games. And it would be nice if all of them could find a way to contribute, but if just 1 or 2, if Dylan Moore just, hits a home run or 2, or Luis Torrens goes, gets 7 at-bats and he goes 3 for 7 with a double and a couple walks or something like that. Like, it could be a huge difference. So I'm taking the bench, the Mariners bench, as kind of the key underrated part of this last 10 game stretch.
Yeah, we told you 6 key players. It's probably going to end up being like 9, 10, 11, but whatever. You know us. You know what you signed up for here by clicking on this video.
5 in the title. Yeah, because 5 sounds better on YouTube than the top 6 or 10 or 9. Sure. So top 5.
Sure. I'm gonna go with another combo here for my last one.
I knew you would cheat.
Yeah. I'm cheating even more. I'm gonna go with Andres Munoz, Matt Brash.
At least mine was creative and daring.
Yeah, right.
Lazy.
And I'll throw Justin Topa in here as well.
I knew you were gonna throw Topa in there too.
Yeah, you got to throw Topa in there, of course. But really, it's Munoz, it's Brash, right? those guys are on it. We talked about this on yesterday's episode. If those guys are on it, you have arguably the best 1-2 punch in any major league bullpen. And you can beat anyone with those guys at their very best. But in the particular case of Munoz and Topa, not really Matt Brash lately, but Munoz and Topa, those guys haven't really been at their very best lately, right? But with Munoz, right, we've seen him kick into an extra gear here as of late. While he still is really struggling to land that slider effectively, he's consistently hitting 100, 101 mile per hour with the four seam. And now he has this two seamer that he's using a lot more often, which is probably a direct response to the lack of slider that he has. That could be a legitimate weapon for him, especially going up against guys like Corey Seager, Nathaniel Lowe, lefties, where that pitch is breaking away from those guys. That could be crucial for him to have that two seamer working in this series and over the course of the stretch in general. Because it's not just those guys, right? When we get to the Houston series, it's going to be Yordan, it's going to be Kyle Tucker, Michael Brantley. It's going to be guys like that as well that he's going to have to throw against. So you're going to need Andres Munoz. You're going to need Matt Brash because these are really good offenses that you're going up against. These games are likely going to be very, very close. You're probably going to be, you know, if you're in a position to win these games, you're probably holding on to a 1-2 run lead at best. So you're going to need Munoz to be nails. You're going to need Matt Brash to be nails. You're going to need Justin Topa to be nails. And you're probably going to need someone outside of that three as well, like a Taylor Saucedo, like a Gabe Spire as well to step up. So this is a huge, huge stretch for the bullpen. The Mariners bullpen, I don't think it can be overstated, could literally determine everything with how this stretch goes, right? Because like the offense could do its part, the starting rotation could do its part, but if the bullpen can't hold these leads, then you're cooked. So a lot of this rides on Andres Munoz, on Matt Brash, on Justin Topa. Yeah, and that cannot be overstated, like I said. So we'll see how it all plays out, but those are our key players for this stretch. Apologies for how late this episode is going to come out. Apologies for the cuts in this episode. This has been a nightmare of a day for us technically. So hopefully we're able to get you this episode in a timely manner. I'm going to end this recording because it looks like we're lagging again, because of course we are. The Lockdown Mariners podcast is synonymous with technical difficulties. You guys know this, but this time it's completely on me. It's on my internet today. I don't know what's going on with it. Anyway, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Lockdown Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.